Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of 2 Corinthians. Today we're beginning to look at chapter 13, which of course is the final chapter in the book. Paul is already in his concluding remarks. He's wrapping up what he has to say to the Corinthians in this second letter. Notice how chapter 13 begins. Now this will be my third visit to you. Every matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, I already gave you a warning when I was with you a second time. I now repeat it while absent. On my return, I will not spare those who sinned earlier or any of the others. Now, Paul mentions that this will be his third visit. What were the other 2 visits? Let's kind of rehearse the timeline. We've, I think, talked about this before, but it's good to review it. Paul's first visit to the Corinthians was when he established the church. That was on his second missionary journey, and he came to the city of Corinth and stayed there for quite a time, beginning the church and spending a lot of time with them establishing a strong church in Corinth. Remember, it was in Corinth that he met up with Aquila and Priscilla, who had recently arrived from Rome, and they became his colleagues in ministry from then on. Now, after he concluded that first visit, the founding of the church in Corinth, that was also the conclusion of the second missionary journey, he returned to Antioch in Syria, which was the sending church of all of his missionary journeys. And then on his third missionary journey, he went to the city of Ephesus and spent a lot of time in Ephesus. You remember, Ephesus is, of course, on the coast, the western coast of Asia Minor, what is today Turkey. Now, it was while he was in Ephesus that he wrote the letter of 1 Corinthians. He had received some word from the church. There were some problems they were having, some issues that needed to be dealt with, and some questions. And so he answers those in the letter we know as 1 Corinthians. And then after he wrote 1 Corinthians, he made a visit to Corinth. He left Ephesus, crossed the Aegean Sea, visited Corinth, and then went back to Ephesus. We know that this visit, which is not recorded in the book of Acts, by the way, but is talked about in this letter of 2 Corinthians we've already seen. This visit was kind of a painful visit because some of the problems he had addressed in 1 Corinthians were still there and he had to deal with them. He calls it a painful visit as he dealt with these issues. And it was out of that painful visit that some of the criticism of Paul that he's been answering in 2 Corinthians arose. Okay, so now he's written 2 Corinthians and he is on the way to visit them the third time, which will be toward the end of the third missionary journey. So those are the 3 visits. The first was the founding of the church on the second missionary journey. Then that quick visit he made to them while he was in ministry in Ephesus. And now he's coming to them again at the end of the third missionary journey for the third time. And notice he says when he comes, if some of these issues aren't cleared up yet, some of the sins I talked about last time that need to be repented of and dealt with, I'll deal with it when I'm there. I don't want to. I hope you've already got it cleaned up. But he says, when I'm there, I'll deal with it if I have to. Then he goes on to say in verse 3, since you are demanding proof that Christ is speaking through me, well, he is not weak in dealing with you, but he is powerful among you. Now that some of that criticism he's been dealing with throughout the letter about how he's not really all that impressive and these so-called super apostles are better. Paul has already dealt with that throughout the letter. But he says, listen, there's no weakness in my dealing with you when I come, for I'll come in the power of Christ. For to be sure, he, Christ, was crucified in weakness, yet he lives by God's power. Likewise, we are weak in him, yet by God's power we will live with him in our dealing with you. So Paul is responding to this criticism that he was weak when he was there in person, but powerful in his letters. He says, listen, when Christ came to us, it is through the weakness of the crucifixion, that which the world thought was weak. They thought that was weakness for him to get crucified, but that was actually the victory. For in the crucifixion and the resurrection, the power of Christ was shown. And that's the same way I minister to you. You might say I'm weak, but it's the same weakness of the cross. Because in what humans consider weakness, the real power of God is demonstrated. And it is that power of Christ, that resurrection power, in which I minister by the name of Christ. So he says, I'll be there shortly for my third visit with you. And if necessary, I'll completely deal with these issues if they're still unresolved among you. All right, in our next session, we'll start looking at verse 5. He has a few more words to say to them about how they need to live as Christians. So he's in the wrap-up stage, but he's got a few more significant things to say. And so we'll begin looking at those in tomorrow's session in our 5-minute Bible study in the book of 2 Corinthians.